They tell me I have 5 senses. I feel like I have 17 on a night like tonight where we are jam-packed. We are high atop a very on-guard downtown Nashville, Tennessee, Sunday, March 15th, the year of our Lord 2026. We're going to do a full-on college football show, but then also we have severe weather bearing down on us. I got to get us out of here in a decent amount of time because I got to make sure Bradley can get home. I don't want him stuck on the roads in that kind of weather. And so my two passions just colliding here tonight. And then FanDuel hits us up and says, guess what? Win totals for the season are out as well. What? For a few teams? No, for the whole country. So we're going to talk about that tonight. I have several thoughts. I'm giving you leans. I'm not just going to share the news. Okay, we're not just reporting tonight. We're actually going to take a stand, which I'm accused of not doing in the spring. I'm going to take a stand softly on a lot of these teams. I've got spring intel all over the place. We're going to tell the truth about Dan Lanning tonight. We did not give him a heads up it's coming, so he'll learn the truth about himself right along with the rest of us. And I got a question about teams on the clock, which was interesting because you could go the route of this team needs to win or the head coach is going to get fired, but you can also go the route of, hey, this team's coach is not going to get fired, but if not now, then when? You know, Clemson last year, Penn State last year, although it turns out the coach did get fired there. So we got a whole lot to get to. We're jam-packed. They're watching us in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, Dallas, Texas, Gary, Indiana, Flora, Mississippi. People, it's never been more important that you subscribe to the channel. Well, actually, you can do it anytime you want, but just check and make sure. We're doing that thing right now again where we're getting a lot of feedback from people when I say this on the show, and the feedback sounds like this. Hey, you always say subscribe to the channel, and I never do it because I thought I was, and then I checked, and I wasn't subscribed. So just check and make sure you are because it's free, so it doesn't really change anything for you, but it helps us. Speaker series starts this week. Can't tell you where we're going yet, but we got 2 big stops this week, and we will go all over the place for the rest of spring. Because what else are we going to do? Sit around here? All right, let's dive in. Got a lot of spring camps opening up. Nebraska is going to wrap their spring practice and have a game before some of these places have even begun spring practice. So it's weird. Not all the calendars just perfectly overlap. But for the teams that have begun spring practice, we got our ear to the ground. Ohio State has begun spring practice. You know, they're losing Caden McDonald. They're losing a lot defensively. But at Ohio State, sometimes you don't have to have heard the names to just blindly assume they're going to be pretty good. But in Ohio State's case, like Edric Houston, yes, we expect him, they expect him to backfill and be a big-time role player there. But here's what's interesting. They got a couple of guys from Alabama in the transfer portal. James Smith was one of them. And I don't know about you, if you're an Ohio State fan, you've probably heard this, but if you listen more and more from around there, it sounds like they're really excited about James Smith. And for that matter, if you look at the edge position, Kenyatta Jackson at the edge position, he's back. He's going to be a big-time playmaker for him. But then what's another name you hear? Quay Russaw, another Alabama transfer. So they got that pair of guys from Alabama that at least in the early portion of spring ball look to be checking all the boxes they need him to check. Now, Zion Grady is probably a guy who they have in-house there that has a higher overall upside, but he's a much younger guy. Legend Bay continues to be a name that we hear, that Ryan Day himself has mentioned a lot, kind of comparing him to Curtis Samuel from back in the day, just having that hybrid potential, feel like you could play him in 37 different roles offensively, and he is going to be a really good player for them, I think, for a long time. Okay. Let's go down the road a pretty good ways to Tallahassee, Florida. Florida State's got to get it done this year. But before I mention what they've got to do this year, I'm going to read you some stats from last year because this is mind-blowing. Pretend like you didn't know I was talking about Florida State. Pretend I just took the paper, popped it as we do, and I said, guess this team, Jesse. Guess a team that was 6th offensively in yards per game last year, and they were 28th defensively in yards per game allowed last year. Who would that be? That would be your 5-7 Florida State Seminoles because they were 105th in turnover margin. I watched them last year. I've got all the stat profiles and all the papers in front of me, but producer Jesse threw that little fastball under the chin today, and I couldn't believe it, and I made him double-check it. Did we triple-check that? We did. We triple-checked it even. So, yeah, it's true. There's a little bit of an underrated quarterback battle happening at Florida State. Underrated because I think people are paying attention to more high-profile battles out there, but Ashton Daniels and Kevin Sperry are battling it out there. Now, I think if FanDuel were to put odds out, and we haven't gotten to that point in spring ball yet, but one of these days maybe FanDuel puts odds out on quarterback battles, Ashton Daniels would probably be a solid favorite to win the job, but it is a legitimate battle. It's not a cosmetic quarterback battle, as we sometimes have in spring ball. But behind that, okay, let's get beyond that. Let's say Ashton Daniels does win the job. Whomps does he throw in the ball to? Well, it's easy. Deuce Robinson. Guy had over 1,000 yards last year. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So let me rephrase the question. Beyond Deuce Robinson, who's he throwing the ball to? Because Stats and Info, second paper pop of Spring Intel, has informed me that while Deuce Robinson did put up just over 1,000 yards receiving last year, wide receiver 2, 3, and 4 combined for less yards than Deuce Robinson had. Wide receiver 2, 3, and 4 for Florida State put up 1,070. Javen Boggs, that's a name we've circled. That's a name a lot of folks close to the Florida State program have circled and told us to watch out for. They're replacing an entire offensive line here. They are leaning pretty heavily on the portal to do that. And so when you got that kind of dynamic, you don't know. I am convinced in a lot of cases that the coaching staffs themselves can't even know. How would you know? How would you know? That, as Meemaw so articulately said back in the day, is why God invented spring football. Now we go all the way, we hop on the jet, we go out, we probably land in Laredo to refill and refuel, and then we get back up in the air and we go all the way to Los Angeles, and we talk about USC. I got great news for everyone. If you're a USC fan, I've got great news for you. If you're a USC hater, I've got great news for you. We have been told this team will look better physically than any team they've had since Pete Carroll was there. That's good news if you're a Southern Cal fan for obvious reasons. It's good news if you're a hater too, because you don't think there's anything under the hood at USC. You think it's all cosmetic. You think that they always have good-looking athletes. You think that they can win a competition getting off the bus. They look great on magazine covers, but when it comes time to get the job done, Lincoln Riley's going to choke every time. That's what a USC hater would sound like. I know, because we have a lot of them in our audience. Well, it feels like they're seeing the effect at Southern Cal of that strength and conditioning overhaul they did a little over a year ago. And we were told to watch out for that at the time. A lot of folks around USC said, we are making several changes here. One of them that won't be talked about so much outside of our world is strength and conditioning. And they did. And look, we've been given a pretty good heads up from several different people. You just watch a year from now. Well, it's a year from then. And we're seeing it. Okay, so now spring football starts, and I've got on top of that the number one recruiting class in the country on campus. Several of those true freshmen seem like they're going to be contributors. I'll give you one right now. Luke Wafel, five-star edge player, 6'5", 265, extremely long, extremely versatile. I think you'll see him on the field this year. My concern, interestingly enough, with Southern Cal is at the wide receiver position. And I have maintained, and I still maintain, that if my biggest concern about a USC team, outside of line of scrimmage, but line of scrimmage is getting figured out, and that's kind of a concern for everyone this time of year. But if my biggest concern about USC is either quarterback, which it's not this year, or receiver, which it is, and the head coach is Lincoln Riley, I'm going to at the very least count on him to fill those buckets with enough to get the job done. So they got a kid named Terrell Anderson from NC State. He's a transfer receiver. He looks like a guy who I'm going to be able to count on. But also Trent Mosley is a true freshman. I know it's halfway through spring ball. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't a big-time role player in the slot position specifically for them. And Caden Dixon-Wyatt, that's another freshman. Those are just two names that have emerged pretty early in USC camp out there. So let's keep an eye on that. But I'm going to go back to what I said, because right now it's March 15th. So we've got a long way to go until they open up against whoever it is they open up against, San Jose State in week 0. That's a week 0 game, yeah? I'm telling you they're going to look different. That's all I'm telling you. They're just going to look different. Will they play different? I don't know. We got a little ways to figure that out. Clemson, we're going all across the country. Clemson. So, interesting times here. Dabo's obviously still there, but as you may or may not remember, Garrett Riley, a few years back, was a big-time addition. Well, we were all excited about it. I was excited about it. Dabo finally has learned and going outside the program for a big-time OC hire. Riley was at TCU, I think he was. And so he went and he got Garrett Riley as his offensive coordinator. That was going to be a big deal. And it really just never clicked the way that I thought it would. So Garrett Riley's gone, and they brought in Chad Morris. Okay, and that was probably where the story was going to end until week 1, until Dabo got asked about it the other day. And I got a quote for you. It's on the screen right now. If you're listening on podcast, this was Dabo Swinney speaking about his departing coordinator and incoming coordinator. He said, quote, "It was fun to learn something different and all that. But it's like being back in America after living in Spain for 3 years. I'm back to living in Pelham, Alabama." Unquote. So there's that. Chris Vizina's there. Chris Vizina finally going to be the starting quarterback at Clemson. I feel like I've been looking forward to the Chris Vizina era for, the better part of a decade or so. So that's finally here. He's a big dude now, 6'4", 210. Jesse, remember, we saw him at Elite 11 way back in the day, way a long time ago. And Chad Morris is coming in there. Now, here's the thing. Here's what we're hearing out of Clemson right now. It's spring ball. You're installing what for Dabo is not a new offense, but for the kids on that roster is a new offense. And there's a lot more tempo as a piece, a foundational piece of this offense. So they're kind of struggling with that. And then also you got a bunch of new receivers. So they're you just got new players all over the place. So they're kind of struggling with that as well. Courtney Kelly is a transfer defensive tackle. And he looks to be out for a little while now. I don't know how long it's going to be, but that's a pretty big hit for them. But I will say this. One of the encouraging things that you keep on hearing from a couple of different people now is when Tom Allen came in there and took over as DC last year, they went through the year. One of his quick observations was, we're not fast enough in our secondary. That's really what we got to do. And they went and targeted specifically speed in the secondary, and they brought in some guys there. Yeah, I know that's a sentence that we're not used to saying, what Clemson did in the portal, but they did go get guys in the portal. Jesse, what would you say, 3? Probably 3 guys, maybe 3 or 4 in the secondary that are starters will be portal guys. We asked him to consider it, him being Dabo. He has considered it. Let's see if it pays off. And lastly, at Nebraska. Nebraska last year, at this time, we were all looking forward to the Rule Year 3 effect. And also he had gotten Dana Holgerson as coordinator. And we had Dylan Raiola, returning starter at quarterback. This was going to be the year. They were 68th passing yards per game. They were 80th in rushing yards per game. And Dylan Raiola has subsequently departed Lincoln, Nebraska. And as you'll notice, not a whole lot of wailing, not a whole lot of gnashing of teeth. Just kind of all right, we tried it out. It didn't work. Good luck to you at Oregon. Good luck to us with Kenny Minchey. Oh, wait, Kenny Minchey just said bye. He is not coming here. He's going to Kentucky. What are we going to do? We're going to go to UNLV. We're going to get Anthony Calandria. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion this is going to work out. It's just one of those college football stories. It's kind of like when last year with Austin Simmons going down at Ole Miss, and then in comes this backup quarterback from Ferris State that no one's heard of, and then all of a sudden you're in the playoffs. And that's just like a college football story, and you see versions of that every year. Not always to that extreme, but there's always this sort of, man, who could have seen this coming? Whom stood have seen this coming? I think maybe this year's whom stood have seen this coming special is Anthony Calandria, the quarterback that Nebraska didn't want to have to worry about going to get out of desperation, ends up being the perfect fit for that offense. Like, I am very convinced that they will improve their offensive numbers this year, specifically because of what that kid can do off script, doubly specifically because of what he can do in the run game. And they got a UCLA transfer at wide receiver, Quasi Gilmer, and at linebacker, Owen Chambliss. Those are 2 names. That's a linebacker from San Diego State, by the way. Those are 2 names that are standing out for Nebraska. Starting to get that itch, Jesse. The Nebraska itch. We've gotten it the last 2 years. We've taken over. They've missed by half a game each time. But that just means keep betting it. And eventually it will hit. And I got a long time to talk myself into 9 or 10 wins for Nebraska. Long time. A lot of runway. Okay? I can't even see the end of the runway. That's how much runway we have right now. Spring intel. It's a beautiful time of year. Nebraska's spring game is the 28th, right? March 28th. And there are teams that haven't started spring ball. Oregon will not have started. When does Oregon start spring ball? Jesse's Googling. Jesse, you don't have all the spring dates memorized? Why are you here? What are you even doing? It's distracting. So Matt Rule swears by this. Now, Matt Rule says, I'm never going back to a late spring. Go ahead. UCLA starts April 2nd. Nebraska wraps spring ball March 28th. The cold weather team wraps spring football before the warm weather team begins spring football. Okay. To each his and her own, I guess. Let's move on. What a text we got the other day. I'm just minding my own business, as you do this time of year, Friday. And I get a text from FanDuel Mike. And FanDuel Mike says the following. Win totals are out. Okay. And I thought he meant a few teams. Because remember, they dropped Arkansas on us, and there were like 3 teams that had win totals out for a while. So I thought he meant a new batch of teams had been released. Oh, no. FanDuel Mike, when he texted me that, it might as well have been in all caps. All the teams are out. All of the P4s, at least, that I can tell are out. It may be everybody that's out. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go by conference here. I'm not going to do them all tonight. I think we're going to save some of this for Thursday, because it is March. So the season's still quite a ways away. We don't have to just empty the entire bucket tonight. Bradley, here's a good endpoint for you. SEC win totals are out at FanDuel. This right now makes it no longer hypothetical. If you think that Ryan Silverfield is going to come in and turn around Arkansas overnight, you don't just have to say it. You can go to FanDuel right now because Arkansas over-under is at 4.5, and you can just sledgehammer that over repeatedly, which you can legally do in Arkansas now, by the way. So right now, you can see on the screen, or if you're listening on podcast, just go to FanDuel. You can see all the team totals, even if you don't intend on betting it. That's where you can find all of this information. Here's what stood out to me. Look at that screen. That right there is further confirmation about my theory that the SEC has become more like the Big 12 than the Big 12 was for a long time. For a long time, this was the Big 12, where you have 13 teams currently on this board with an over-under win total between 6.5 and 9.5. No team is higher than 9.5. All but 3 teams in the league are between 6.5 and 9.5. That was the Big 12. It was so compressed, and there's no real tip of the iceberg. It's just like a whole bunch of teams compressed into this one group. Meanwhile, in the Big 12, Texas Tech's kind of pulled away a little bit. So let's dive in here. I'm going to give you some leans. These are very, very tentative leans, and I reserve the right to change my mind on these. LSU stands out to me immediately. So, full disclosure, on Friday, when FanDuel released these numbers, LSU opened at 8.5. Then they shot up to 9.5. Now, the juice is moving there. These aren't all even juice right now. I lean a little bit under if you're throwing 9.5 at me. If LSU's got to go 10-2 for this over to hit, I'm leaning more towards 9-3 being more realistic. It assumes so much about these transfers working out, about Lane Kiffin working out in year one. And they could even start hot and this under still hit because they end with Alabama, Tennessee, at Texas, at Arkansas. So, Bradley, do me a favor. If you got LSU schedule, there it is right now. Okay, they got Clemson at home. They're going to be a double-digit favorite against Clemson in week 1. Let's just assume for a second, glass mostly full with LSU. Let's go Clemson win, Louisiana Tech win. Let's take them to Oxford and win. And Texas A&M comes in there. There's a world where they start 5-0, but it still gets really tough down the stretch there. But here's another thing that could happen. Okay, let's still go Clemson and Louisiana Tech as 2 wins to start the year. So LSU's 2-0. You're telling me you couldn't see a world where they go 0-2 the next 2 weeks? Like, those are going to be tough games. At Ole Miss and Texas A&M back-to-back, so they could go 2-2 there. Either way, you got that March in November where you got Bama, Texas, at Tennessee, at Arkansas. 9-3 in many scenarios could have LSU as a fringe playoff team. So if I hit an under and LSU can still go 9-3. I would lean under if the total's 9.5 right now. I am going to go another under here. I don't get this movement on South Carolina. So South Carolina, it's another team. They opened at 5.5. Then South Carolina jumped to 6.5. And I got to lean under. If you're throwing 6.5 at me with South Carolina, I don't really get the movement. So there are 2 layup games, as you can see, weeks 1 and 2. Should be layups. Kent State and Towson. So we're pretty much starting 2-0 there, or else the under's clearly going to hit. So let's say 2-0. Then there are 3 games, Mississippi State, Kentucky, and Arkansas, that are just elsewhere on this schedule. They could go 3-0. They could go 1-2 there. Let's go 2-1 in those games. So we've already got 4 wins there. You've still got to find me 3 more wins. And the other teams on their schedule, guys, are like at Alabama, at Florida, Tennessee, at OU, Texas A&M, Georgia, at Clemson. And you got to find me 3 wins in there. I don't know. I think that 5.5 number was right. If you're going to try and sell me on 6-6, okay. I think I got to have a little bit too much go right to be banking on 7-5 for South Carolina. So I would lean under right now at 6.5. Now there's a 6.5 out there that I don't think looks right, and that's Oklahoma. So Oklahoma's coming off a playoff visit, a playoff appearance. Oklahoma opened at 6.5. It's just too low. The other teams with totals at 6.5 in the SEC, South Carolina, Missouri, Auburn, Vanderbilt, and then Oklahoma. One of those rosters is just not like the other rosters. Oklahoma, as of an hour ago, was 6.5. And you're telling me since we researched, they moved up to 7.5? Why did you have to tell me? No one would have known. No one would have known. But we're live, pal. Well, I would like to confirm that I was right. Oklahoma 6.5 was too low. I contributed to this because I bet Oklahoma over 6.5 earlier today. Let me tell you why I did. It's kind of the same deal as last year. They opened at 6.5 last year. I bet the over. They went 10-2 in the regular season. And they did that with Mateer hurt. And then when he came back, it was kind of like a sputtering version of their offense. It didn't help that they couldn't run the ball to save their lives. And yet they still went 10-2. Why? Because they could play elite defense. So I'm going to count on the floor defensively for Oklahoma to be pretty good to really good. So let's say top 20 defense this year. I'll even bake in that they fall off a little bit. But I get Mateer back. I got a really good receiver room. I'm just going to trust that they can do this year what Georgia did last year, which is improve fairly significantly running the ball. And you're telling me, well, as of an hour ago, 7-5 would have won here. Yeah, look, if I were really pressed on this, there may still be value on the over at 7.5, but I didn't bet that. I want to be very clear. I bet 6.5. So good for us for being ahead of the curve there by an hour. I've got another over. Jesse, what's Georgia at? Is Georgia still at what we had him at an hour ago? We need to tell FanDuel to freeze numbers for us because that's how markets work. We just freeze them at our leisure. Yeah, Georgia's at 9.5. This number's too low. Georgia over at 9.5. I've locked this in already. There are 4 other teams with a win total of 8.5 or higher in the SEC. Georgia faces one of those teams, and that is Alabama. There's no Texas. There's no LSU. There's no Texas A&M on this schedule. They get the Florida game in Atlanta this year because Jacksonville's under construction. The roster continuity, the staff continuity, it's Georgia. Just that should be its own bullet point. And also, think about how good they were in one-possession games last year. So I'm going to count on Georgia to give me an over at 9.5. And then I was looking at Ole Miss. So there were some slight leans I had that I wasn't really ready to just do a part of the segment on. I have a little bit of an Ole Miss investment strategy right now. So Ole Miss got released at 7.5, over under 7.5 wins. I think that there is a little element of if/when the final Pete Nakos headline comes. Trinidad Chambliss, all the court cases are settled. He's playing this year. I think there may be enough juice in the market, kind of pun intended, to bump this up to 8.5. So I've already taken a little bit of Ole Miss over at 7.5. I think there could be a little middle opportunity here to hit that under once it gets to 8.5, because 8-4 seems reasonable for Ole Miss this year. So I looked at that. Alabama's kind of attractive at over 8.5. And my simple thinking there, although I'm not putting anything on it right now, my simple thinking there was, what are the 3 toughest games? Georgia's one of them. Let's say at LSU is another one. And what, Texas A&M? Probably the third one. They could lose all 3 of them, still hit the over. As long as you go beat Tennessee, don't get upset. Florida State's on the schedule. We know that's no gimme. I would lean over with Alabama. And what kind of action is Texas going to get? So Texas was at 9.5. But if you really feel like Texas is going to be elite this year, it doesn't matter how hard their schedule is. It just doesn't matter. They got Ohio State in week 2. If Texas is elite this year, they'll beat Ohio State. It'll kind of make the game look like it looked in Columbus last year, but turn the hourglass upside down. They'll go to Tennessee and win. They'll beat Oklahoma and Dallas. They'll be like an 11-1 team if Texas is elite this year. That's what they'll look like. That's what they'll have the capability to do. Now, I didn't put anything on it, but those win totals in the SEC, there's nobody with a double-digit win total right now. We're going to continue this momentarily. I did want to quickly tell you, we've been mentioning the Pate State store, which is open. Earlier today, guy hit me up. He had purchased one of the Pate State Lil Freights T-shirts. Some say our child wear is better than our adult wear. Those aren't official terms. Like, there's no tab that says child wear, I don't think. He got a chalice of supremacy out of it. I was feeling very generous. So Perez is going to be shipping him a chalice of supremacy probably tomorrow. It's a little late to get something in the mail today. But anyway, whether you are 2 years old or 92 years old, there is something in the Pate State store for you. PateStateMaterial.com. There you see some examples over my shoulder right now as we speak. Appreciate you guys watching live, by the way. If you are, or if you're listening to the replay, it makes no difference. Just make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It wasn't just SEC win totals that were released. Big Ten win totals are posted. Now, this is where it gets a little bit fascinating, because the big story in the Big Ten has been that there's been like a tier 1, and then there's pretty big separation, and then there's like a sandbag on the bottom of the league. And there's just a lot of gross at the bottom of the Big Ten. If this graphic on our screen right now is to be believed, that continues this year. Because there are 2 teams, Indiana and Oregon, that both have over-under win totals of 10.5. As for teams that have totals of 5.5 or lower, the Big Ten has 7 of them. The SEC, by comparison, has 3. So that's kind of how the perception of the sport is right now. The top of the SEC doesn't quite match the top of the Big Ten, but the bottom of the Big Ten, way worse than the bottom of the SEC. Rutgers, Maryland, UCLA, Northwestern, Minnesota, those teams all under 6.5. Then you got Wisconsin, Nebraska at 6.5. But the top 3 makes sense. Like, I'm not even really going to talk a whole lot about Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. Ohio State's total is 9.5 because their schedule's tougher this year. Now, we do have it on pretty good authority that if Oregon and or Indiana had Ohio State's schedule, they would also have totals of 9.5. So obviously there's a huge schedule piece that gets baked into this. But the first team I want to talk to you about is not Ohio State. I want to talk to you about Penn State. Because Penn State has an over-under win total of 9.5. It's year 1, though. New coaching staff. A lot of roster churn, right? Well, the coach that's coming in there churned a lot of his old roster in there, and the schedule is workable. I lean over 9.5 wins for Penn State. What a world in which we live. So the big 3 on this schedule, USC, October 10th, at Michigan the next week, and then they got a trip to Washington in early November. If I could just get 2-1 there, if Matt Campbell's watching tonight, buddy, if you can just go 2-1 there, I feel pretty good. And because of all the newness, I do need to remind you, they don't play any of those teams until week 6. Their first 5 weeks are Marshall, at Temple, Buffalo, Wisconsin, at Northwestern. Just a garbage, inexcusably bad out-of-conference schedule. But you're not allowed to criticize Big Ten out-of-conference schedules. And so then we get to USC in Week 6, and Southern Cal's got to go to Penn State, which is basically like flying to Russia for USC. And then we're off to the races. They play 5 of the bottom 7 teams in the Big Ten odds. There's no Oregon here. There's no Ohio State. There's no Indiana. I think they're going to be able to win 10 games this year. So I lean pretty solidly Penn State over 9.5. Now I've got to balance it out with an under. And for that, we go to Illinois. I wrestled with this, but Illinois being at 7.5, it's a slight under lean for me. 8 wins last year, right, Jesse? So they went 8-4 last year, and nothing's really wrong with them this year. I just think they replace a whole lot. And I think there's a little bit too much of 2025 baked into this number. The defense took huge hits. And it could be that Brett Bielema just snaps his fingers and magic happens and they're as good, if not better, in which case, oh well, I lose $20. But they did draw Ohio State and Oregon, and there is certainly a scenario where Illinois just goes 9-3 this year. I'm kind of banking on, with so much newness, they end up on the wrong side of some one-possession games, and there's that group of teams like Nebraska, Iowa, even like at Northwestern. It's kind of the perfect time for them to play Duke, but I kind of just wonder about a lot of these games like at Michigan State even. Pat Fitzgerald, year one magic. I kind of think there's some one-possession games in there. Maybe they end up on the wrong side of them, but I don't know. I've not made a good career of going against Brett Bielema. So I wouldn't, in retrospect, ignore the last minute and a half of the show. I want it to be on record, but ignore the last minute and a half. Now, this next minute and a half, I feel pretty good about. And if we know one thing about me when it comes to over-under season win totals, it's pay attention when I talk about Nebraska. 2 years ago, I took Nebraska over. They missed by a half a game. Last year, I took Nebraska over. They missed by a half a game. I am now fearlessly and boldly and proactively taking Nebraska over 6.5 wins. And let me tell you why. Matt Rule year 4. That's why. Yes, forget Matt Rule year 3. It's Matt Rule year 4. They missed it by a half game the last 2 years. They will be upgraded on offense. Mark my words, they will be. They will not be in the 60s and the 80s in passing and rushing offense, respectively, this year. They did low-key excellent work in the portal. Even though they did not target Anthony Calandria at quarterback, he will just work out for them, because that's how college football happens. It will work out for them. Now, here's the problem. Look at the schedule. Hot starts have not been a problem for Nebraska. Garbage finishes have. So they play Ohio, and then Bowling Green, and then North Dakota, and then Michigan State, and then Maryland. I'm counting on 5-0 at that point. Now, here's the downside. You get a little overconfident. Because if they're 5-0 and you're thinking, man, I just need 2 more wins. Okay, well then Indiana comes to town. And then they go to Oregon. And then a vastly improved Washington team comes to town. And then comes the 2-week stretch. You got to go on the road for both of them, but there's a 2-week stretch, and that's your moment. Because we just got to win either at Illinois or at Rutgers. And I can tell there's a wobbly tire. And there's a little bit of steam coming from under the hood, but it's just Illinois and Rutgers. We just got to win one of them. Boom, boom. You're -2 turnovers in each game. You lose both of them. Ohio State comes and splatters you. And then you're on the road in Iowa City the last week of the season trying to get yourself to 7-5. I don't want that. But I could see it. So how about we just take care of Washington when they come to Lincoln, Nebraska? Washington has no business winning in Lincoln, Nebraska. Come on now. So I think we can get 7 wins. Dare I say we can get 8 wins? No, 7. 7 will do. 7 will do. A lot of hands went up, justifiably so in the control room. 7 will do. Lastly, I'm going to take another over in the Big Ten, and that's Wisconsin. Wisconsin's over-under win total is 6.5. I am a hard over lean on Wisconsin this year. There's no Ohio State on the schedule, nor is there an Oregon on the schedule, nor is there an Indiana on the schedule, nor is there a Michigan on the schedule. Well, who did they play in the Big Ten? Good question. 6 of the bottom 7 teams in the odds. That's who they play in conference play. Now, they do have Notre Dame out of conference, but we ran the numbers. They could lose to Notre Dame, and Penn State and USC and Iowa, and they can afford 2 more losses. And you add in all that with the fact that Luke Fickell is still a good football coach, even if he made some wrong moves at the outset, and everything's on the line up there. This is a slam dunk must-win season. It is a prove-it moment for Luke Fickell, and I'm just going to trust him backed into a corner. We all know how a Badger acts backed into a corner. Luke Fickell's no different. They're one and the same at this point. You're telling me that I can't get 7 wins this year? It's Wisconsin. 7 wins? Yeah, I can get it. So I'll take over on Wisconsin as well. Very scary times outside right now. We had a 51-mile-per-hour wind gust at BNA, that's Nashville's airport, for the uninformed earlier, which brought us to this next question. Just taking a brief detour. College football will resume in a second. Oscar said, when will you go storm chasing again, and will you ever go live when you do? Excellent question, Oscar. I may go as recent or as soon as like 2 hours from now. But yes, we will stream. Yes, we will live stream. That's all I can say right now. Yes, we will. Did I give enough information? Yes, we will. Yeah. So here is the dilemma. I can't answer that because I myself don't have like a weather YouTube channel. Now, when we're with someone, and we chase with many very, very esteemed, very, very high-profile people in the chase community, they stream. So like if I was with Brad Arnold tonight, which I'm not, because he's already over in Mississippi somewhere, you can just go watch Brad Arnold stream. But we may be cooking some stuff. So we may be working on some things down the road. But yeah, I think we'll have a busy April and May. We'll be out there on the road storm chasing. It's always fun. We go to as many campi, plural of campus, as possible in the spring for the speaker series. And then every now and then we have to, like if I were scheduled to sit down with Kirby Smart, we're not doing Georgia this week, but if I had to sit down with Kirby Smart and we had him scheduled for like 3 p.m. tomorrow, but then I knew there was going to be a tornado outbreak. We did this with Mike Norvell last year, remember? We were going to do Norvell later in the day, and then we found out we needed to storm chase later in the day. So we asked Mike, can we move it up to the morning? He acquiesced. And then we got out of there and we went to Memphis and we storm chased that day. It's the only chase Jesse has ever participated in. It was a total bust. Terrible luck. Not me, Jesse. And so, yeah, that's the tightrope we walk this time of year. Very first world problem, but that's the tightrope we walk. Speaking of Florida State, they will briefly be mentioned in the next portion of the show. Calvin from New York City. Which fan bases are the most tortured and deserve better than what they've gotten? Well, sorry, I had my papers mixed up. Arkansas is the first fan base that came to mind here. Arkansas has been done wrong. Arkansas's fan base has been done wrong. They are passionate, place is incredible, and it's off in the northwest corner of the SEC or the northeast corner of the Southwest Conference. They kind of have like an us against the world mentality up there. I love going up there. We go there sometimes to storm chase. We go up there sometimes to visit. We went there for the Broyles Award just a few weeks ago. So I'm in Arkansas fairly regularly. I know a lot of you have never been. A, don't knock it till you try it. B, very underrated airport at XNA, not to be confused with B&A. And 3, it's a phenomenal game day environment even when they suck. So when they're good, it's off the charts. They just haven't been good enough. Their last double-digit win season, does anyone want to guess? It was 2011. That was the very end of the Bobby Petrino era. In SEC play the last 8 years, Arkansas is 14-52. I'm going to repeat that for effect. Arkansas, in conference play the last 8 years, 14-52. Most recently, they went 2-10. There has been a litany of bad here. John L. Smith, the Brett Bielema era, in retrospect, wasn't so terrible. Chad Morris, after that, disaster. Sam Pittman. I just think Sam Pittman came along at the exact wrong time for Arkansas, as it turns out. And now it's Ryan Silverfield. Ryan Silverfield probably got the least amount of national attention when he was hired there out of any of these guys, and ironically may end up being the best fit. Remains to be seen, but fingers are crossed because those folks have never tapped out. They have never given up. They deserve it. They remind me like Tennessee. Tennessee was bad for a long time. Heupel came along, pulled the program out of the ditch. Now they're winning. They hadn't won a national title or a conference title yet, but they're winning. So I'm really pulling for Arkansas. Next up, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech fans badly deserve a winner. They're way overdue for it. Their last double-digit win season was a decade ago. Their last big bowl win was like the 08-09 seasons. And that's still Frank Beamer era back then. And they're coming off a 3-9 season. That's the worst year they've had since 1992. And here's what we have to do sometimes on the show, and I don't like this part, but I have to acknowledge we got a bunch of high school kids, a lot of college-age boys and girls listening to the show. And I have to remind myself when we talk about football programs like Virginia Tech that you have no idea what I'm talking about. When I am mentioning Virginia Tech in the national conversation, you have no idea why they're there. You think I'm wasting time talking Virginia Tech on the national landscape, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, but I have to swallow that bitter pill of realizing, wow, it's been that long since Virginia Tech was really a factor. But I do want to tell you guys, once upon a time, they were a factor. When I say they were a factor, I mean as you had the national championship conversation, Virginia Tech was in it. I don't know if it could happen again. That's up to James Franklin, but they were in it. And also, on a pretty related note, it became like one of the most feared home field environments to have to go into. For some reason, my mind remembers 1,000 different Thursday night games for Virginia Tech. I don't know how many Thursday night games they actually played, but there was this era where ESPN really put premier, like top-rated matchups on Thursday night. Reese Davis, I think, used to do play-by-play on those games. And Virginia Tech was like a staple. And, man, that place is incredible. And, you know, I look at James Franklin being hired there, and I think about one day Virginia Tech ranked top 10. Miami's coming to town, also ranked top 10. And it's a primetime game. Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit are in the house. And we really get treated, in some cases for the first time, if you're younger, you really get treated to the idea, the experience that is Lane Stadium when Virginia Tech is nationally in the picture. It's a great time. We deserve it. They sure deserve it. And not too far up the road, had to get my cardinal directions. What about West Virginia? You know, last spring, I was up in Morgantown, sat down with Rich Rod for the speaker series, and then afterwards, I had a little time before I was going to get out of there, so I just went out into the stadium, did some cardio. It was like a beautiful day. It was 75 degrees, and no one was in there but me. And I sat there for a little while because I've never seen a game in Morgantown. I've never seen a game at West Virginia, but because I am of a certain generation, I think about Steve Slayton. I think about Pat White. I think about from 2005 to 2011, them winning 9 or more every year. From 2002 to 2011, they won 8 games or more every year. So again, kind of like I was talking about with Virginia Tech, if you're 20 years old right now, it may not seem like it, but there was a period where if you were talking about the national championship picture, that Mountaineer logo was a staple on your TV screen. Anytime you're looking at those BCS rankings, they're a factor. They were within an eyelash in 2007 of playing in the national title game. And they hadn't had a top 25 finish. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. They haven't finished top 25 in any of the AP poll last 7 years. That's not the mind-blowing part of this. This is worth a paper pop. West Virginia has not appeared in the top 25 in the last 7 years. I have to pause for effect. I can't believe that's true. Now, I didn't say finish. They haven't appeared at any point in the top 25 in the last 7 years. And really, honestly, what I'm hoping, Jesse, is I'm hoping we got it wrong. I'm hoping someone emails us and says, hey, actually in 2022 in week 9, they were in there briefly. It would make me feel better if we actually screwed that stat up. I don't think we did, though. Amazing fans, amazing atmosphere. And when I was there in spring, all I did, I like to think there was a janitor somewhere watching me, wondering what I was doing. All I did was I went and sat on the first row of the bleachers. And I sat there for like 20 minutes, just imagining what that place used to be like and what it could be like again. No one says it couldn't be that way again. And lastly, team we've talked about already today, but I'll talk about them once more. Nebraska deserves it. Nebraska fans deserve it. We went up there for the Michigan game last year. We did a live show there the night before. This is my first time in Lincoln. It's my first time at a Nebraska game. I so badly want reasons to go back. And this is a third time in 3 mentions of a team that I have to ask, how old are you? Because if you're in your 40s or older, you've lived in a time where Nebraska was the premier team in college football. In the mid-90s, they were a powerhouse. But then if you're 22 years old, you, again, have no idea what anyone's talking about when they talk that way. That could actually, mathematically, that may be your dad talking to you about what Nebraska used to be like. And like if you're 47 years old, that fact has really snuck up on you. If you live up in Kearney, Nebraska, or North Platte, Nebraska, you're 45 years old, you have lived through a dominant era, the golden era of Nebraska football, and your 19-year-old son laughs when you talk about it. And it's a slap in the face. Their last 10-plus win season was 2012, the Will Compton era, as some call it up there. The last 9 seasons, earmuffs for the weak-stomached. Their win totals, 4 wins, 4 wins, 5 wins, 3 wins, 3 wins, 4 wins, 5 wins, 7 wins, 7 wins. So in a way, Matt Rule has gotten the job done. In relation to what Nebraska football had been, no appearance in the college football playoff rankings since 2016. That means the entire top 25 rankings, not just the top 10. They have not appeared at all in the CFP rankings since 2016. And yet Arkansas, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, Nebraska, 4 for 4. Awesome fan bases. They haven't been good in quite a while, and we hear regularly from all 4 of those fan bases on this show, in our inbox. We hear from them all the time. So I just wait around for lightning to strike. Now, here's what could happen. What could happen is this time next year, Jesse, we are talking about Silverfield and James Franklin and Rich Rod and Matt Rule, and they all have just gotten themselves in position to where they're all a contender. They've surprised everyone in 2026. Maybe we at least go 2 of 4 there, but I'm hoping for 4 of 4. They're watching us in Myerstown, PA, Alpharetta, Georgia, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thank you guys so much. A lot of house cleaning here. A lot of just warning people or begging people about the upcoming season. Guy who lives in Moundridge, Kansas, hit us and he said, which teams need to win it all or win enough to save their coaches' butts this year? It sounds like Guy is asking who's on the clock. And this could be one of 2 things. Like he said, you could need to win to save your job, or you could need to win just because if you don't win now, when are you really going to do it? And that latter category is how I look at Texas. Steve Sarkisian and Texas are on the clock this year because they're all in. They are Ohio State 2 years ago. Buckeyes ended up winning a title when they were all in. Texas, don't know because the season's still ahead of us. Arch Manning, plus that portal class, you may have the number 1 quarterback in the country and tackle in the country and edge player in the country and wide receiver or one of the best receivers in the country, a loaded cornerback room, overhauled the running back room entirely. It's all there. Everything you could possibly want or say that you need as the head coach or the general manager or a staffer or a fan at Texas is there. Schedule's a little tough. Yeah, guess what? All of them have to play you too. So Oklahoma made the playoff last year. So there's no complaining about schedule when you load up like this. Texas has got to get the job done. By get the job done, I mean they have to be in that national championship picture when the national championship happens. So I guess I'm saying they got to make the national title game. I know that's lofty, but when are you ever going to have it put together better than this? So they're on the clock in 2026. I think Oregon is too. It's kind of the same thing here. There's no job security pressure for Dan Lanning, but it's the same thing. We know you can win a ton of games. Now, can you show us that you can win in the playoffs? Can you show us that when you go up against other rosters that look like yours, other coaching staffs that are as highly paid as yours, can you get the job done? Can you be better than them? Defensive line returns. Dante Moore's back. DeCorian Moore and Evan Stewart are back. And all we're looking for here is we're looking for you to continue to do what you've been doing in the regular season, but then when we come up on Ohio State, or maybe an Indiana, or maybe a Texas, maybe a Georgia, when we come up on them in the playoff and we got to beat 2 or 3 of them, can we get that job done? That's what you're on the clock for at this point, because all the other questions are answered at Oregon. Now, for much different reasons, Florida State's on the clock. Mike Norvell and FSU. FSU got to be on the clock because it's kind of a final straw moment. It's kind of a final stand moment, it feels like, for Mike Norvell. 2023 was forever ago. Sometimes you can do a great thing and you live off the equity of that thing for a long time. That equity burned up really quick. That's what 2-10 and 5-7 will do for you. No more equity. Everyone kind of looks at that and says, that was fun, but it turns out that was the exception, and mediocrity, or worse than that, has been the rule. And I can't push back on it. And also, there's this widely held understanding that the only reason that that coaching staff even survived last year was because the buyout was too big, because of the renegotiated deal they had when they won the ACC and got sort of low-key shafted out of a playoff spot a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. So Florida State, I don't know what the total is. Like, I don't know what the win total they need is, but certainly got to be above 500, I would think. Now, that brings you to the next question of, what does 7-6 do? Is 7-6 okay? You go from 2-10 to 5-7 to 7-6. Is that okay? Technically, it's progress. It's 3-year linear progress. But when you have 13 wins 4 seasons ago, no, it doesn't really work. Now, USC. At USC, this is a different, it's kind of like a hybrid bucket of those two. No one's asking Lincoln Riley to win a national title or bust this year. I, at least, am not sitting here saying you better win or you're going to get fired. Maybe somebody is. I'm not. But USC has gone 11-3, 8-5, 7-6, and then 9-4 last year under Lincoln Riley. And we've talked about this dynamic a lot on the show. Of a couple of years ago, he looked around and he said, yeah, okay, I admit it. We got to make some changes. And they did. And not the least of which was defensive changes, and then they got better. They've made strength and conditioning changes there. Even if you can't see it yet, they've gotten and are getting a lot better there. And then he got kind of 2 years, make sure we reset, make sure we got everything in place. All right, here we go. We're coming off the heels of a number 1 recruiting class. We made some really good moves in the transfer portal. We've got a 3rd-year starter at quarterback. You've got to win this year. You've got to make the playoffs this year. That's kind of how Lincoln Riley and USC are on the clock. I don't push back on that, and I don't disagree with it. They got Ohio State and Oregon coming to the Coliseum, by the way. I was out there. I went and did the speaker series with Lincoln last spring, and they were putting the finishing touches on a lot of new renovation on campus, and construction in downtown Los Angeles, not cheap. So I got a lot of things going for them there that are all predicated on being reflected in on-field results. If you don't have the on-field results, no one cares what your facilities look like. No one cares what your recruiting classes are ranked. They're just going to come poach all your guys. So that's what we're waiting on. What about Baylor? It's been a long time since we talked about Baylor. Dave Aranda, because his athletic director ended up getting fired last year, got to keep his job. It looked like Aranda was gone, and then all of a sudden the AD's out, and, hey, we're just not going to make a move on the head coach. What? Everybody had already written Dave out of there. Since he won the Big 12, he's gone 6-7, 3-9, 8-5, 5-7. And I'm a Dave Aranda guy, but I can't just keep backing him if the results look like that. And keep in mind, in the Big 12, we've got this barometer that's been set, this bar that's been set over in Lubbock, Texas, and everyone's looking at that, and you're either playing catch-up or you're just watching the top half or the top part of the Big 12 pull away from you. Because for a while in the Big 12, even if you didn't have your act together, it's okay.
It's okay because all the conferences just compressed together. Well, it's not that way anymore. And that's a problem if you're not Texas Tech or you don't have your act together. And so I think Baylor is certainly on the clock. I'd put Wisconsin here as well. Luke Fickell came there. Luke Fickell came to Wisconsin a few years ago, and I was sky high on the hire. And as it turns out, he hadn't even come close to matching what Paul Chryst was doing. 7-6 to 5-7 to 4-8. It just feels like the wood was a little wet when they tried to light it. Or, in football terms, he had the wrong philosophy and wrong guys on his staff offensively at the outset. They've tried to fix that. But as Lincoln Riley found out, once the car leaves the garage a little bit and gets out on the road, once the plane leaves the runway, it's hard to repair it unless you land it or you pull the car back into the garage. But that's not fun because no one wants to do that. Well, that's kind of what they've been doing at Wisconsin. They went and took a ton of transfers, I think over 30 of them, Jesse, and a lot of guys went out. And if you just look on paper, it's hard to tell whether they definitively upgraded the caliber of player. But that's paper, okay? So I have to trust that Luke Fickell's evaluations of the guys he's bringing in and the guys that they're letting go or they're watching walk out the door, I have to trust that they came out a net winner in that trade-off. But they've got to get it done. 4-8 last year. I would say you need to add, I think they need to go 8-4. That's what I would guess they need to go up there. And there were rumors that they were going to be looking for a new head coach, and instead what they did was they kept Luke Fickell and they chose to invest in the recruiting class. Now, I'm a believer in that philosophy if I believe in the coach, and I believe in Luke Fickell. Here's the problem, potentially. We said that about Napier at Florida last year. Florida didn't fire Billy. They just invested a ton in talent acquisition, and it was more the same the next year, and then they ended up firing a head coach midseason. That is the way it could go at Wisconsin this year. I'm hoping for their sake it goes the opposite way. We move on. Jesse, you been checking the radar in there? No, not been checking. Wow. Probably don't even have a radar scope on your phone, do you? What a loser. That's unbelievable. That is so pathetic. All right, let's go. Truth Teller series continues. A lot of truth needed in this sport. A lot of truth needed this time of year. And what we like to do is we like to point our finger. We just blindfold ourselves, point our finger. And tonight, the finger is pointed a long way away from here. Eugene, Oregon. The truth about Dan Lanning. Not lies. What's the truth about Dan Lanning? Well, I wrote my truth about Dan Lanning. And it's one sentence, and here it is right here. The truth about Dan Lanning. He's one of the top head coaches in college football. Sometimes I have to pause and look at the live chat, see what people think about that. Now, knowing our audience and knowing my replies like I think I do, we will get pushback on that sentence. And I will ask, why are we getting pushback on that sentence? Because Dan Lanning unequivocally is one of the top head coaches in college football. Now, you did notice what I didn't say. I didn't say the top. I didn't even say top 3. But I would say one of the top head coaches in college football. Now, here's my case for that. And you feel free in the comments to state your opposition. They have won double-digit games every season he's been there. They won the Big Ten in 2024. They beat Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State during that year, so they didn't duck the tough teams. They have finished inside the CFP top 8 the last 3 years. Also, just keep in mind, in the midst of this little run, he lost a head coach caliber offensive coordinator. Kenny Dillingham was so good that Arizona State hired him. And then Lanning takes Will Stein and inserts him, and Will Stein's so good, Kentucky hires him. So now they've promoted from within up there. And so in his 4 years, he's already cycled twice in offensive coordinator. Their recruiting average has been number 4 in the country. During his time there, they've been a top 10 portal team. I really think they've been like a top 5 portal team. And here's what the pushback will be. Mark my words, I'm live on air right now, but I know what the comments will be. There will be many people, despite what I just said, they will say, what has Dan Lanning won? You say he's one of the top head coaches in college football. What has he won? Well, I just told you what he's won. But this is, of course, the group that believes if you haven't won a national title, you haven't won anything. So you either have won a national championship or you got nothing to talk about, nothing to brag about. There's might as well be nothing on the Wikipedia page. Erase the bio entirely. You've done nothing. Well, I want you to give me the knock. The knock is he doesn't finish. I know what the knock is. It's rhetorical. The knock is he doesn't finish. So his great crime, Dan Lanning's great crime at Oregon so far, is basically losing to the team that's either going to be in the national title game or win the national title. It was DeBoer a few years ago at Washington. Then it was Ryan Day at Ohio State. Then last year, it was Kurt Cignetti in Indiana. So go back and look at what I said, or listen to what I said. Because what I said, my truth about Dan Lanning, which I think is the truth about him, is he's one of the top head coaches in college football. Every bit of the pushback about him not being able to finish and them not getting the job done in the playoff can be true, and my theory, my truth still be right. Because so far, he's done exactly what, let's just throw a number out. Let's say he's the number 6 head coach in college football. Number 5, number 4, whatever. He has done so far what the number 5 head coach in college football would do. Done really good in talent acquisition, done really good in winning a vast majority of his games, and then he runs up on someone that would be ranked above him, and he loses to him. That's kind of what the 5th overall head coach in college football would do. So none of that's inaccurate. I see his resume. I've watched all the games. I've been at most of them. Nothing's inaccurate about that. I just always am quick to remind people of one thing, and that is Dan Lanning, you look at his driver's license, says he's 39 years old. Now, Nick Saban just retired a couple of years ago, pretty widely regarded as the best to ever do it. Had 7 national championships when he retired. Nick Saban was 52 years old when he won his first title. That was at LSU in 2003. Lanning is 13 years younger than that right now. So you're just going to have to forgive me if I don't look at Dan Lanning's lack of national championship notches on his belt and think, well, I mean, that guy sucks. If he hadn't gotten it done in the first half decade of his head coaching career, he's not going to get it done. And the reason, aside from common sense, that I don't go down that route is because I saw people do it with Kirby and I saw people do it with Ryan Day. People with Kirby Smart watched him win a whole bunch of games at Georgia. Ironically, he kept running into Saban in Alabama, and they lost, and they lost, and they lost. And then all of a sudden they didn't lose, and they won a national title. Then they won another one the next year for good measure. And now no one says Kirby can't win the big one anymore. And then they just turned their attention to Columbus, Ohio, and they talked about Ryan Day being born on third base, and he can't really win the big one. He's been gift-wrapped this great situation, but they just can't get it done. And, oh, look, they can't even beat Michigan. And then they found a way not to beat Michigan and still win a national title. And then they beat Michigan last year for good measure. Now no one's doubting Ryan Day anymore for the time being. And these people never disappear. They just turn their attention elsewhere. And right now it is Steve Sarkisian and it's Dan Lanning. And those are the two that are the latest in the can't win the big one club. And eventually they will. And then it'll eventually become someone else. But what did all those guys have in common? They had in common the age-old adage that Meemaw taught us from birth, and that is there is a big difference in cannot versus have not. And the fact with Kirby for a long time was not that he could not win it, it's just that he hadn't. Same with Ryan Day. Same with Dan Lanning right now. Dan Lanning will win a national title at Oregon. Steve Sarkisian will win a national title at Texas. At least I think they will. And then they will be no different a coach than they are right now. If Lanning wins a national title in 10 months, he will be no different a head coach than he is right now. But there is a certain, kind of perspective that a certain kind of person has on this sport where they will think Dan Lanning transformed himself because his Wikipedia page has another sentence on it that it didn't used to have. I've never looked at it that way. I would ask that person right now, not in January of 2027. Right now, I'm going to have a head coaching draft. We're drafting for the next 5 years' results. How far are we going to get in that draft before Dan Lanning comes off the board? I don't think very far. So, I think Dan Lanning's one of the best head coaches in college football, and probably still has another rung or two on his personal and professional ladder he can climb. There you go. I've got big news. It's actually basketball related. FanDuel actually hit us up and told us two things. The first thing they told us is win totals are out. Well, we already talked about that on the show tonight. The other thing FanDuel told us is free money for everyone. You may be thinking to yourself, what's the catch? There kind of isn't one. Well, there may be like a little bit of one catch. So new signups or 10-year veterans, all of you, go to FanDuel right now, log in, click on your little bonus tab, and just opt in to the free money. They're giving you free money. The only catch is you got to bet it on NCAA tournament action. That's it. It's not your money. It's their money. They are putting it in your account, and you go bet it. And hey, if I bet with that money and I win the money, guess what, Jesse? It's mine. It's all mine. And I'd like to say that I'm responsible for this, but it's not even my idea. FanDuel hit us up and just told us about it. Look at that gold basketball there. We need to get a football like that. We need to hang it from the ceiling. You know, we've got truss work above us where we can lower stuff from the ceiling. We haven't had that before. So I had some ideas. I got to float them by you when we're off air. All right, let's move on. Let's wrap it up. Bad weather is impending. Oh, my nose itches too. We are doing the mood tracker. Sorry, Brad, that's probably not a good endpoint for you. Here's a good endpoint. The Mood Tracker series continues tonight with LSU. We're taking a deep but brief look at the LSU fan base and what is the mood and what should the mood be down there. So this is going to sound like a play on words, but it's not. It just so happens Lane Kiffin got hired there. It just so happens his first name is Lane. But I would categorize the mood amongst LSU fans as fast lane, but more so the ideology of what it's like to be in the fast lane. So you all out there have driven in the left lane before. Some of you have no business over there. In fact, free PSA for our younger viewers who haven't been taught the rules of the road. All the lanes aren't created equal, guys. There is a reason why that left lane is called the passing lane. Because if you're not passing, if you're not going faster than the flow of traffic, you don't need to be over there. So that concludes the free PSA. I know some of you aren't aware of that. That's okay. You don't have to tell people you weren't aware, just as long as you learned it tonight. So don't be floating over there and wondering why someone's tailgating you. They're tailgating you because you need to get out of the way. Well, when it comes to LSU football, they're in the fast lane. And Lane just got hired down there, and now he's driving the car, purple and gold car, that's in the fast lane. And to whomst much is given, much is required. This is the fair trade-off that has existed since the dawn of time. And from a fan's perspective, from an LSU fan's perspective, understand where the mindset is at right now. Not only are you LSU, which means a lot if you're an LSU fan. That means a lot if you're a college football fan. Not only are you LSU, and not only are you all in financially. I mean, look at these numbers being floated around. 40+ million on a class? Whom stood to thunk it? So not only are you all in on hiring a coach, acquiring a roster, just the overall pantheon of LSU in the 2000s, winning a national title with every head coach up until the last one who you just unceremoniously dumped for a new one. Not only do we have all that going for us, Nick Saban's gone. So the thorn that was in your side for a long time, the one that went 13-5 against you, he's gone. And so it's a new era in every possible way, and nothing's holding LSU back but LSU. That's how you feel, rightfully so, from Thibodeau to Shreveport and everywhere in between, if you're an LSU fan. And you kind of feel affirmed, too, because you feel a certain way about LSU if you're an LSU fan. But see, outsiders around the South, sometimes they look at that, and they look and they laugh at the way LSU fans feel about their program. But the way an LSU fan feels about LSU football is totally validated when the head coach of a rival within conference who is headed to the college football playoff chooses to leave before he can coach in the playoffs because your place is that much more desirable than theirs in his mind. That validates that there are more people out there who view LSU in the light they view it than LSU fans. that proved there's at least one other person out there, and it happens to be the head coach we want to hire, that views us as that much greater than fill in the blank, in this case, Ole Miss. But LSU fans do not limit the list of greater thans to just Ole Miss, I can assure you. The belief there is that when LSU is right, it is without equal in college football. And history suggests that there's a lot of validity to that. But the trade-off now is if you're in that passing lane, if you're in the fast lane, if you're Lane Kiffin, in this case, there is no getting over. That's the difference in an LSU fan's mentality and someone behind the car of a 2012 Tacoma on I-65 out here right now. He could just get over, and he could let the faster cars pass him. You don't get to do that if you're Lane Kiffin. You don't get to do that as the head coach at LSU right now. If they wanted more of that, they would have kept the guy that used to be there. If they wanted a guy to get over and let Bama and Georgia and Texas by, they would have just kept Brian Kelly there. They're telling you they're better than that, and you better be better than that. So you better be leading the pack, not watching the pack go by you. And you know what? I don't even have a problem with that, and they obviously don't either. That is our show. We are on the road this week. We've got 2 big speaker series stops this week. Follow on social. You'll eventually see where we are. And we will be back Thursday to do a show. And until then, you got to be heads up. Let's be weather aware tonight. Head on a swivel. In the Carolinas tomorrow, I think it could get really bad over there. Pretty atypical for that kind of setup to be over there. So let's eyes open, ears open. And otherwise, please subscribe to the channel. We're out of here. For Director Bradley, Producer Jesse, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great start to your week, and God bless.